Judge Diane Mitchell closed her briefcase and locked her office door at exactly 6:15 p.m. on a Thursday evening in downtown Phoenix. It had been a long day on the bench with back-to-back hearings that included 3 sentencing proceedings, 2 motions hearings, and 1 particularly contentious custody case that had required her to make difficult decisions affecting a child's future. At 47 years old, with 15 years of experience as a superior court judge, Diane was accustomed to the emotional weight of her position, but that didn't make days like this any easier. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the video. She walked down the quiet courthouse hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she passed closed office doors and darkened courtrooms. Most of the building had emptied out by this hour, with only a few attorneys still working in the law library and security personnel making their evening rounds. Diane nodded to the security guard at the main entrance as she pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped into the parking structure adjacent to the courthouse. The parking structure was a 5-level concrete building connected directly to the courthouse by a covered walkway. Diane's assigned parking space was on the 2nd level, clearly marked with a sign reading, "Reserved for Judge D. Mitchell." It was one of the perks of her position, and on evenings like this when she was exhausted and just wanted to get home to her husband and 2 teenage sons, she was grateful for the convenient location. She unlocked her silver Lexus sedan, tossed her briefcase onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. The car's dashboard display showed it was 78 degrees outside, still warm despite the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. Diane pulled out of her parking space, turned left toward the exit ramp, and began making her way down to street level. The parking structure was nearly empty at this hour, with most state employees and courthouse staff having left over an hour ago. As Diane rounded the corner on the 1st level approaching the exit, she noticed a police cruiser parked near the payment kiosks. Phoenix Police Department vehicles regularly patrolled the courthouse area, so the presence of a patrol car wasn't unusual, but something about the way this particular cruiser was positioned, partially hidden behind a concrete pillar with a clear view of vehicles exiting the structure, made her take notice. She continued toward the exit and had just passed the cruiser when suddenly red and blue lights erupted behind her, accompanied by a short burst of siren. Diane glanced in her rearview mirror with confusion. She hadn't been speeding. The parking structure had a strictly enforced 5 miles per hour limit, and she'd been going even slower than that. She hadn't run any stop signs or made any illegal turns. There was absolutely no reason for a traffic stop. Nevertheless, she pulled over to the side just before the exit gate and put her car in park. Through her rearview mirror, she watched as a police officer stepped out of the cruiser and began walking toward her vehicle. He was a white male in his early 30s, medium build with short blonde hair and the kind of swagger that suggested he was very comfortable with his authority. Diane noted his badge number automatically, a habit she'd developed over years of dealing with law enforcement in her courtroom. She rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Despite her position as a judge, despite her years of experience in the legal system, and despite the fact that she was literally parked in her own courthouse parking lot, Diane knew that interactions between black citizens and police officers could escalate quickly if officers felt threatened or disrespected. She'd seen it happen too many times in her courtroom. The officer approached her window and leaned down slightly, his hand resting casually on his weapon belt, license and registration. His tone was flat and authoritative, offering no explanation for the stop. "Certainly, officer." Diane kept her voice calm and professional. "May I ask why I'm being stopped? I wasn't speeding and I didn't violate any traffic laws that I'm aware of. I'll ask the questions." The officer's voice hardened. "License and registration now." Diane reached slowly toward her purse on the passenger seat, narrating her movements. "I'm reaching for my purse to get my license and registration." She pulled out her wallet and registration, handing them through the window. The officer took them without a word and stepped back to examine them. Diane Mitchell. The officer read her name aloud, then looked at her car and back at the documents. "This vehicle registered to you?" "Yes, it is. My name is on the registration you're holding. What are you doing in this parking structure?" His eyes narrowed. "This is a restricted area for courthouse personnel and official business only. I work here." Diane gestured toward the building behind them. "I'm a judge at this courthouse. I was leaving after my workday, and you stopped me as I was exiting." The officer let out a short, skeptical laugh. "You're a judge? Sure you are, and I'm the chief of police. Actually, my brother-in-law is the chief of police, but that's beside the point." Diane kept her voice even despite her growing irritation. "I'm Judge Diane Mitchell, Superior Court of Maricopa County. I've been on the bench for 15 years, and I work in this building every day. My parking space is clearly marked on the second level with my name and title." The officer glanced back at the parking structure, then returned his attention to Diane with obvious disbelief. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but impersonating a judge is a serious crime. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle. I'm not impersonating anyone." Diane's patience was beginning to wear thin. "I am exactly who I say I am. If you check your records or call the courthouse administration office, they'll confirm my identity and position. Step out of the vehicle." The officer's hand moved closer to his weapon. "Now." Diane felt her heart rate increase, but forced herself to remain calm. "Officer, this is completely unnecessary. I've provided my license and registration. I've explained who I am and where I work. I haven't committed any traffic violations. What is the legal basis for ordering me out of my vehicle? The legal basis is that I'm a police officer, and I'm giving you a lawful order." The officer's voice rose. "If you refuse to comply, you'll be arrested for obstruction." This was exactly the kind of situation Diane had dealt with countless times from the bench, an officer overstepping his authority and then threatening arrest when questioned about it. The difference was that this time she was the one being targeted, and she had no immediate recourse to her judicial powers sitting in her car in a parking structure. She took a slow breath. "Officer, I'm going to reach for my phone to call the courthouse security office so they can verify my identity. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it, so there's no misunderstanding. Don't reach for anything." The officer's hand was now on his weapon, though he hadn't drawn it. "Keep your hands where I can see them. How am I supposed to call for verification if I can't reach for my phone?" Diane's voice remained calm, but the absurdity of the situation was becoming dangerous. "This is my workplace parking lot. I have every right to be here. I have identified myself and provided documentation. You have no legal grounds to detain me further. I have grounds because I say I have grounds." The officer stepped back and spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7-3 requesting backup at the courthouse parking structure. I have a suspicious person refusing to comply with lawful orders." "Suspicious person?" Diane couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. "I'm a judge, leaving my own courthouse in my own car from my own designated parking space. What exactly is suspicious about that?" What's suspicious is a black woman claiming to be a judge driving a luxury car out of a restricted parking area. The officer hadn't meant to say it quite so bluntly, but the words were out before he could stop them. There it was. The real reason for this stop had nothing to do with traffic violations or restricted parking. It was about a white police officer seeing a black woman in a nice car leaving a courthouse parking lot and deciding she didn't belong there, that she must be lying about who she was and that she needed to be questioned and detained. So that's what this is about. Diane's voice dropped lower, taking on the tone she used in her courtroom when attorneys crossed ethical lines. "You saw a black woman driving a nice car and you assumed I must be doing something wrong. You didn't stop me for any legitimate traffic reason. You stopped me because you don't think someone who looks like me could possibly be a judge. Don't try to make this about race." The officer's face reddened. "I stopped you because you were operating a vehicle in a restricted area, and you're acting suspicious by refusing to cooperate. I've cooperated completely. I provided my license and registration. I explained who I am, and I've remained calm despite you having no legal basis for this stop. What I haven't done is allowed you to illegally search my vehicle or detain me without cause. And now you've called for backup because I had the audacity to question your authority." The officer opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the arrival of another police cruiser. A second officer, an older Hispanic man with sergeant stripes on his uniform, got out and approached. The first officer walked over to brief him, speaking in low tones and occasionally gesturing toward Diane's car. Diane used the moment to carefully reach for her phone, which was in the cup holder. She pressed the emergency contact button and selected her brother-in-law's number. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Chief Martinez. The voice was professional and alert despite the late hour. "Robert, it's Diane. I need you to come to the courthouse parking structure right now. I've been pulled over by one of your officers and the situation is escalating." "What?" Robert Martinez's voice sharpened immediately. "What do you mean you've been pulled over? You're at the courthouse?" "I was leaving for the day when an officer stopped me as I was exiting the parking structure. He's demanding I step out of my vehicle. He doesn't believe I'm a judge and he's called for backup. The officer is Unit 73. Last name appears to be Hutchins based on his name tag." She could hear Robert moving quickly, the jingle of keys and the slam of a door. "I'm 10 minutes away. Do not get out of your vehicle unless you feel you're in immediate danger. Keep me on the line." The two officers were walking back toward Diane's car now. The sergeant looked more measured than the younger officer, but his expression was serious. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Flores. Officer Hutchins has informed me that you've been uncooperative and that you're claiming to be a judge at this courthouse. I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle so we can sort this out. Sergeant Flores, I have Police Chief Martinez on the phone right now." Diane held up her phone so they could see the call was active. "He's on his way here and he'll verify my identity when he arrives. I'm happy to wait in my vehicle until he gets here." The two officers exchanged glances. Sergeant Flores spoke into his radio requesting confirmation of the chief's location and status. A moment later, dispatch confirmed that Chief Martinez had just left his office and was en route to the courthouse. Officer Hutchins looked less confident now. His earlier swagger had been replaced by a growing unease as he began to realize this situation might not be what he'd assumed. "Ma'am, if you really are a judge, then I apologize for any confusion, but I still need to understand why you were in this parking structure." "Because I work here." Diane's patience was completely exhausted now. "I've told you this repeatedly. I'm a superior court judge. I've been on the bench for 15 years. I have an office on the 4th floor of the courthouse. I park in a designated space on the 2nd level of this structure. I finished my workday at 6:15, walked to my car and was leaving when you stopped me for no legitimate reason. We received reports of suspicious activity in this area. Officer Hutchins was grasping for justification now. We had to investigate." "What reports? From whom? And what specifically was suspicious about a woman walking to her car in a parking structure and driving toward the exit?" Neither officer answered. They stood by her car looking increasingly uncomfortable as they waited for the chief to arrive. Diane could hear Robert's voice through her phone asking for updates every few minutes. She assured him she was safe but angry and that the officers were maintaining their distance. 7 minutes later, right as the sun was setting and casting long shadows through the parking structure, a black SUV with police markings pulled up quickly behind the patrol cruisers. Chief Robert Martinez stepped out, a tall man in his early 50s wearing his dress uniform despite the late hour. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he strode toward the scene. Behind him, another vehicle arrived, this one belonging to Sandra Winters, the court administrator for Maricopa County Superior Court. She'd apparently been contacted by someone at the courthouse and had come to see what was happening. "What the hell's going on here?" Chief Martinez's voice carried authority and anger in equal measure. He looked at Officer Hutchins and Sergeant Flores, then at Diane sitting in her car. His expression softened slightly when he saw his sister-in-law, but the anger returned immediately when he focused back on the officers. "Chief," Officer Hutchins began nervously, "we received reports of suspicious activity, and when I stopped this vehicle to investigate, the driver was uncooperative and made claims that seemed false." "What claims?" Martinez stepped closer to the young officer who visibly shrank back. She claimed to be a judge, sir. Hutchins' voice wavered. I thought she was lying to avoid scrutiny, so I called for backup and attempted to verify her identity. You thought Judge Diane Mitchell, a 15-year veteran of the Superior Court who works in this building every single day, was lying about being a judge? Martinez's voice was dangerously quiet. Did you check the parking space she came from? Did you see the sign that says reserved for Judge Mitchell? Did you bother to call courthouse security or administration to verify before you detained a sitting judge? Hutchins said nothing. His face had gone pale. Sandra Winters approached the car and leaned down to speak with Diane through the window. Judge Mitchell, I'm so sorry this happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, Sandra, just angry and tired. Diane finally turned off her engine and opened the door, stepping out for the first time since the stop began. I've been sitting in this car for over 20 minutes, being treated like a criminal by officers who refuse to believe I work here, despite me providing identification and explaining the situation repeatedly. She turned to face Officer Hutchins directly. You want to know what's really happened here tonight? You saw a black woman driving a nice car in what you assumed was a restricted area. Instead of checking the facts or using common sense, you made an assumption based on nothing but my appearance. When I explained who I was, you didn't believe me, because apparently black women can't be judges in your worldview. And when I refused to submit to an illegal search and detention, you threatened me with arrest for not cooperating with your abuse of authority. Hutchins opened his mouth, but Chief Martinez held up a hand. Don't say another word, Hutchins. You're done talking. Martinez turned to Sergeant Flores. Why didn't you de-escalate this situation when you arrived? You're a supervisor. You should have verified her identity immediately through proper channels instead of backing up an illegal detention. Sir, I was trying to assess the situation. Flores looked miserable. I should have handled it differently. Yes, you should have. Martinez pulled out his radio. Dispatch, send internal affairs to the courthouse parking structure immediately. We have a situation that requires investigation. He turned back to Diane. I'm sorry this happened to you. This is completely unacceptable, and there will be consequences. Diane nodded. There need to be consequences, Robert. This can't keep happening. How many people get stopped like this every day by officers who make assumptions based on race and then hide behind their badges when they're called out? I have the power and position to fight back, but most people don't. That's what makes this so dangerous. Over the next hour, internal affairs officers arrived and took statements from everyone involved. Security camera footage from the parking structure was pulled, showing Diane walking from the courthouse to her car in a space clearly marked for her use. The footage also showed Officer Hutchins positioned in a spot where he could watch people exiting the structure, suggesting he'd been conducting unauthorized stops of other drivers as well. A review of Hutchins's recent activity logs revealed a pattern of traffic stops in and around the courthouse area, with a disproportionate number of those stops involving Black and Hispanic drivers. Several of those stops had been flagged by other supervisors as questionable, but no action had been taken. Officer Ryan Hutchins was placed on immediate administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Within 2 weeks, he was terminated from the Phoenix Police Department for racial profiling, conducting an illegal detention, and making false statements in his initial report of the incident, where he'd claimed Diane had been combative and threatening. Sergeant Flores received a formal reprimand and was required to complete additional training on de-escalation and implicit bias. He kept his job, but his reputation was damaged, and his chances of promotion were severely diminished. Chief Martinez issued a department-wide memo about the incident, using it as a teaching moment about the consequences of racial profiling and the importance of treating all citizens with respect, regardless of their position or appearance. He also implemented new policies requiring supervisors to personally review all traffic stops conducted in courthouse areas to ensure they were legitimate. Judge Diane Mitchell returned to her courtroom the next day and continued her work, but the incident stayed with her. She used her position to push for broader reforms in how law enforcement interacted with the community. She became an advocate for better training and accountability, and she never hesitated to call out misconduct when she saw it from the bench. The story spread through legal and law enforcement communities as a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumption and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Officer Hutchins became an example of how quickly a career can end when prejudice overrides professional judgment, and Diane Mitchell became an even stronger voice for justice, using her experience to remind people that badges don't grant immunity from accountability, and that no one, regardless of their position or power, should have to prove they belong simply because of the color of their skin. Because sometimes justice means making sure that those who are supposed to uphold the law face consequences when they break it, and that the system designed to protect everyone works equally for all regardless of race, power, or position. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.